My name is Janet Morris. I am an elder law attorney. I have worked in the field of elder law for 35 years. And my passion is really helping people avoid problems, legal problems. Everybody, as they get older, is going to end up with some kind of legal problem. And the legal problems that I'm talking about usually happen because we haven't done preventative kinds of things, just like the healthcare prevention. And planning means really, like, right now, everybody who's here is an adult and has mental capacity. So you're able to put a plan in place so that if something happened to you, you would have a plan where you appoint someone to take over for you, financially, legally, and medically. Okay, if we tripped and fell and hit our head, the ambulance took us to the hospital, and we were kind of groggy and couldn't give them our medical information and couldn't sign the consent form, who's going to do that for us? So think about somebody who you trust, and it's time now, if you haven't done it already, to put it in writing, and I'll talk a little bit about the tools to use. So everybody should do this, 18 years of age and older, and especially if you've gotten to this point and you still haven't done it, now's the time, don't wait. I tell people who have kids going off to college, make sure that they sign a power of attorney for healthcare and finances, because if something happens to them, if they're 18 or over, happens to them at school, away at school, you do, as a parent, you do not have the right, and the hospitals, the doctors, the banks, the school has a private relationship with your son or daughter so that they can't share that information with you unless you have something in writing from your son or daughter that says you can share that information with my parent if something happens to me. So why plan? Like I said, everybody gets older. The unexpected happens, skateboarding accident, car accident, fall. Again, you may be in another city or state, like your kid may be off to college. And it lets you have control, because if you decide now who it is, whether it be your spouse, your sibling, your child, your friend, your partner, you can decide and put it in writing, and it's legally binding, so that then somebody else doesn't come in who you don't want to make decisions, start making decisions for you. So what is a legal plan? So during your lifetime, a legal plan consists of a power of attorney for finances, a power of attorney for health care, also called an advance directive, a living trust, which is another kind of document that holds your property for you. Okay, so it's just like you put, instead of having your house the title of your house in your name, it's in the name of the trust. You're the trustee, and then somebody else becomes the successor trustee. So it's just a management tool. Bank accounts where you appoint a beneficiary, life insurance, Medicare, Medi-Cal, in-home supportive services. So these are all tools that you can use to plan for the future. After your death, then the will comes into effect. So when I ask people, do you have an estate plan? They say, yes, I have a will and I have an executor. Well, a will and executor has nothing to do with you while you're alive. It's only after you pass away. So you really do need either a living trust or powers of attorney for healthcare and finances. So also life insurance comes into being obviously after you pass, and your beneficiaries you need to appoint a beneficiary. And then a living trust also has to do with passing your estate on to your heirs after death with avoiding probate.
What's IHSS?
So in-home supportive services is, IHSS is in-home supportive services. It's like Medi-Cal, it's part of Medi-Cal, but it allows for a caregiver at home. So it's not something you can actually plan for today, but when you pick somebody who's going to take over, that they have that in mind to help you for caregiving purposes. So just like going to the doctor, you want to have an idea of, to make your financial plan, you have to know what you have, okay? So the first item is, what do you own? So knowing what you own a house, you have pension, insurance, and know how you own it. Is it in your own name? Is it in the name of you and your spouse? Is it in the name of you and your kid? How is it held? I ask people this and they have no idea. Okay? In California, we used to have property held in joint tenancy if you were spouses, but now it's held as community property with right of survivorship. So it's a different type of title than we used to hold, but it basically does the same thing. But people don't really know. Or it could be in the trust. Okay, the name of the trust could be the one who owns the property. Know what you owe. Do you own it in full? Do you have a mortgage on it? Is there a lien on it? Do you have credit card debt? So you need to know all that because it's part of your plan. If you need care, and I'm talking, okay, so first of all, I'm talking about all of you, talking about you and your spouses, about you and your kids, and also you and your parents, because some of you are caregivers for your parents. They're at an age when they need your help, right? So you're doing maybe not hands-on caregiving, but you are a family, what we call a family caregiver. So you're called in when something happens and you need to know. So does mom own her house? Are there any debts on her house? How is it held? You need to know all these things, and all these planning techniques that I'm telling you about for you, I'm also talking about for your parents who are still alive. In case they haven't done their planning, now's the time to do some planning also. And then what are your goals? Is your goal right now to make sure that your property is safe and you have appointed, make sure that if something happens to you, that you have somebody that can help you while you're alive and that it's going to go to the right people upon your death. So if you don't have a plan like a living trust, your property could go according to the state of not to the state of California, but according to the laws of the state of California. So it'll go to your spouse, to your kids equally, etc. Now let's say you don't want to give your property to those people who would get it according to the probate laws. Say you want to give all of your property to your friend or all of your property to a charity, then you have to do something. So you have to either make a living trust, or you have to title it in a way that it goes to the people that you want, or make a will. So it's up to you to decide, but you have to get information about how to reach that goal. What types of tools are you going to use to reach that goal?
Yeah, I've made a will, but it's been quite a while, so I should update that will.
So that's a very good question. The question is, if you've made a will or a living trust, et cetera, or powers of attorney, and it was a while ago, should you update it? Well, first of all, you should check it out and see, does it still, are the agents still the agents you want? Is the executor still the executor you want? And are the heirs still the heirs you want? So sometimes people die, people get married, people get divorced. It's a really good idea to look at all of your property and your tools. How are they titled every so often? So if there's a death in the family, or every 3 years, or from time to time, you want to make sure that you see that your plan is going according to what you want and according to what your goal is. So your goals may change. When you're married, your goal may be one thing. If your spouse passes away, your goal may be something else, or if you get divorced. So you have to have current goals and know what they are so that you could communicate them to your attorney, and then the attorney can help you put together the correct tools. And as far as financial planning, you want to make a budget to be able to live well until your 90s. Yes.
What is the default if someone doesn't have an advance directive?
Okay, so the question is, what is the default if you don't have an advance directive? So an advance directive is the power of attorney for health care. In California, you as an adult with capacity have the right to make all of your health care decisions. If you are incapacitated, there's no law that says your spouse can make decisions for you, or your child can make decisions for you, or your doctor can make decisions for you. In the state of California, only you can make decisions for you. Now, there are guidelines because how many people, less than 10% of the people have something in writing. Let's face it. So there has to be guidelines so everybody isn't going to court and getting a conservatorship. So the guidelines say that the closest person to you should be the one to make the decision, should substitute for your decision making if you cannot make the decision. So if that closest person to you is your spouse, and that spouse is there at the hospital with you because obviously he's the closest person or she's the closest person to you, right? So the doctor would then share that information and probably allow that person to make a healthcare decision. But if that spouse and you have a child and they conflict, then neither one of them has legal authority if you didn't write it down in an advance directive. Because in the advance directive, you would say, if you wanted to, my spouse, and if he or she is not available, then my daughter, Cindy, okay? Now, you could also put my daughter, Cindy, and if she is not available, then my spouse or my neighbor or whomever. It's up to you. But if you put it in writing, that's legal. And if you have no capacity and you have no writing and people are disagreeing in the family, then somebody has to go to court and get a conservatorship. And that's where it gets expensive and takes a long time. Yes?
Question. I have an adult daughter, and she has a brain injury. And I mean, it's lifetime, I suppose. She wouldn't know what to write or fill out or tell a doctor. You know what I mean? If I wasn't there and the house mother is with her. You know what I mean?
So the question is, if you have somebody who cannot express their desires, how do they make a plan? So what I would suggest is that your daughter appoint you or someone else as her power of attorney for health care, so that if something happened to her, they would call you and you would be empowered to make decisions for her. And of course, as long as she can communicate, you would want to get her input on it to make those decisions. If she's totally incapacitated or you're totally incapacitated, then the person that you appoint makes those decisions. Okay, yes?
We have a living trust. Is the advance directive a part of it? Because I never.
Okay, so I think I'm going to get to that in a second, but there's different tools in the toolbox. And the question was, is the advance directive part of a living trust? No, it's not. But the advance directive, the power of attorney for finances, the living trust, and the will are all part of the estate plan. So everyone needs an estate plan, which includes probably all 4 of those documents. And if you take my workshop, I'm going to be discussing all of those documents. So the question is, one of your compatriots here gets letters, as we all do all the time. Come to this dinner where you're going to talk about financial planning. We're going to talk about annuities. We're going to talk about estate planning. We'll give you a free steak dinner, but they want to sell you something. My rule of thumb, and this goes into this scams and frauds thing, is if somebody calls you and you didn't call them first, do not answer that call. Do not reply to that, because all they want to do, or if you get a lottery thing in the mail, or you get any kind of solicitation in the mail that you did not seek out, please do not respond to that. Because there could be even though, let's say, we do living trusts for $500. Yes, but they're also might be selling you an annuity plan that might not be good for you, okay? Or they want to sell you a financial product. Or you get something in the mail that says, you won $1 million, but please send us $100 so we can tell you how you. Those are, so there's a sliding scale from, cold calls just because that's how people get their business to absolute scams. But my rule of thumb is, and also you get lots of mail that has a kind of postage that's like basically 10 cents, or it's the pre-sorted mail. That means they didn't spend 50 cents on that stamp to give it to you. That's just pre-sorted mail. As far as I'm concerned, you could trash all that mail, because most of the time you're going to get something that you really don't want, and that you don't need. So that if you want to get an estate planning attorney, you go to a reliable source to find, a friend who's done an estate plan, who likes their attorney. You can interview them, go to a couple of them, talk to them on the phone, find out how much they charge. What I do, I'm an elder law attorney, and I do a little bit of estate planning. I also do more consulting on long-term care and how to pay for it. So if somebody's parent fell or has Alzheimer's and started, signing documents and, selling things and getting into trouble, they're usually referred to me to say, how can you help? What should we do? Or my mom needs an assisted living. We don't know how we're going to pay for it. So I look at the whole picture of not only the person, what they have, their income, their assets, but also who's there supporting them. So what other resources can they use to help them? And then what are their goals? Is their goal to go into a nursing home? Is their goal to go into an assisted living? Is their goal to get a caregiver at home? Is their goal to sell their house? Is their goal to keep their house? So I need to know all of those things to help consult with people about what's the right direction to go in and to give resources, sometimes to attorneys, sometimes to real estate agents, sometimes to care managers, sometimes to psychologists. It just, 35 years in the business gives me a lot of resources to help people with. So that's what I do. Identity theft is a huge one. Make sure that you keep, you don't go flashing your Medicare card around and your Social Security card. You keep it safe, but you have it available when you need it. Obviously, the cost of care is very expensive. So Medicare, people think, is going to be the savior for everybody, but Medicare mostly pays for acute care. They don't pay for long-term care. So you either have to think about how are you going to self-pay for the time when you might need a caregiver, which is going to cost you $3,500 and up, whether you have care in the home or whether you go to an assisted living, okay, or nursing home care. So also think about, because you're all young still, long-term care insurance. Although there aren't a lot of policies out there, it's something to think about. And I know as city retirees that the City Club does offer some long-term care insurance. And that, as far as I can tell, what I think is long-term care insurance, even though it's expensive, the cost of care is way more expensive. So if you can qualify and afford it, you should think about it, because you're protecting your assets. If you have $300,000 worth of assets and you're paying $3,000 a year for long-term care insurance, that insurance is going to cover your long-term care, and you can then keep those $300,000 of assets for other things, right? So you don't spend it all down on your care in 3 years. So anyways, that's what I think people should be looking at, how to plan for their long-term care in the future. In the old days, people 65, 68, got a heart attack, boom, they were dead. Okay, then a will was very important. But now, living trusts and powers of attorney are really important, because we don't just die, we get incapacitated and live a long time. So we need to have those plans in place of who's going to care for us and how it's going to be paid for. Okay, somebody says they keep getting letters from is it a credit union you're part of?
The city, yeah.
The city credit union, and that they want you to designate a beneficiary?
Yeah.
Or that you're the beneficiary of somebody else's?
Well, it's in my name, but they have that.
Well,
I want to know who to pay it to.
okay, I think everybody needs to designate a beneficiary, because if you pass, you want that beneficiary to get the money. So whether it's your spouse or your child, you should designate a beneficiary.
They're trying to sell more term insurance.
They're trying to sell long-term care insurance?
No, more term life insurance.
Life insurance. Well then, you have to look at each thing and make sure it's what you want. And if it's not what you want, don't answer it.
I know so many people that have gotten long-term care policies, and then they didn't use them. They died, they didn't use them, and also they didn't know how to use them, or some could qualify.
Okay, that's a
for
good
using it.
point. So the question is, some people spend the money on long-term care insurance policies, but either die before they ever use it, or they don't know how to use it when they get incapacitated.
Yeah.
So and there's another issue that I want to bring up with long-term care insurance policies, is nothing prevents that insurance company from raising the premiums. Now, I don't know about the city employees policy, because that might have better protections, but like the policy I have, they could raise the premiums 50% on me, and then I have to decide, is it worth it, right? So maybe it wouldn't be. But a lot of people don't use the policy because they don't know how, and they basically, most policies, and you have to know what your policy rules are, but most policies go into effect when you have needs in 3 out of the 5 ADLs, which is our activities of daily living: feeding, dressing, bathing, transferring, and ambulating. So if you need help in 3 of those, then you probably qualify for long-term care. So they send a social worker to assess you, they get some information. Sometimes they deny you, in which case you would want an attorney to advocate for you. But like, I had a client who had a good long-term care insurance policy, but they kept denying her because when the nurse assessor came out to see how she was doing, they said, can you bathe yourself? Yes. Can you dress yourself? Yes. Can you feed yourself? Yes. So she said yes to all the ADLs, but in fact, she had vertigo and some other balance problems, and she couldn't bathe herself safely. She couldn't dress herself safely. She couldn't ambulate safely on her own, but she didn't want anybody to see her undressed. So she said, I can bathe myself. So anyways, I had to break through all of that with her and then say, look, you do really need somebody with you to monitor you. Even if they're not like looking at your naked body, they're at least in the, in the house with you. So she did ultimately get it. So what happens if you don't plan? No plan. Stormy weather ahead. Legal and financial plan. Rainbows and sunshine. So it's good to have a plan. Whenever I do somebody's plan, even if it's as little as just a power of attorney for healthcare, people say, I feel so much better. Because they're at ease that they know they have something in writing and somebody has the authority and they don't have to worry. So in the workshop, we're going to talk about all the tools in the toolbox and answer your questions about that. And these are some resources that I like to give out, just general resources. I don't have all the information. There's a workshop series of 5 at 3 different locations, so I'm giving one of those 5 is going to be legal and financial. So you can ask Alex or Tara or somebody else about it. So I want to thank you very much for your attention. It was a real pleasure talking to you today. Thank you.